Hello, and welcome back to the Stories of Northern Life podcast, brought to you by the Sault Ste. Marine Museum. And today I am going to be sharing with you the history of the Horticultural Society presentation that I did for them this Saturday and Monday for CD Saturday and their monthly meeting. So I was asked by the Horticultural Society to give a talk at CD Saturday in their monthly meeting about the history of the society, as it's their 100th anniversary this year. And so I drew up a presentation, did all the research, and I set out to do the whole 100-year history, but it turned out that there was just way too much information, so I actually had to only look at the first 50 years. So my presentation is called Growing a City, the First 50 Years of the Sault Ste. Marie Horticultural Society. So with the Horticultural Society celebrating their 100th anniversary, that would mean that they formed in 1926. But did you know that there was actually a first iteration of the Hort Society in the Sault? So today we are going to be looking at these two societies and then the history all the way up until 1976. So the first society. It was formed in 1908, but first they had to get permission. On December 26, 1907, they received official authorization to form a society known as the Sault Ste. Marie Horticultural Society. They held their first meeting on January 10th, 1908. And that first meeting actually had a tie to our museum. And so it was held in the lecture room on the second floor of the post office. And yes, the same post office that the museum now resides in. So that first meeting was held on the second floor, probably maybe in the back where our discovery room or education room is now. That's most likely where they had their lecture room. So that was a super fun little link I was able to find with the Hort Society. And so at this first meeting, they elected their president, James L. Darling. Then we had Sheriff W.H. Carney, who was the first vice president, John Dawson, who was the second vice president, then C. Cocott, A.B. Wilnot, W.B. Race, J.D.H. Brown, Uriah McFadden, C.E. Sullivan, J.H. Hugel, T.H. Elliott, and L.A. Hinsberger, who were elected as directors. And then P.H.B. Dawson and A.H. Chitty, who were auditors. And now you might recognize some of these names like Uriah McFadden, or even some of the family names, as you can still see them around town. They have streets named after them or places. So their legacy still stands in the city. Also, it seems typical that they would elect a first and second vice president. Not really sure why, or even when this really officially ended. We do see it coming back in the second iteration of the Hort Society. So that just is kind of an interesting thing that we don't really see anymore. At a later executive meeting, they elected J.H. Hugel as the secretary and John Dawson as treasurer. And from the start, their mission was practical and generous. Distribute seeds, plant trees, partner with schools, and make the town more beautiful for everyone. Memberships were just $1. Each member could then select 75 cents worth of seeds for spring. So that meant 3/4 of your membership was coming back to you right away so that you could purchase seeds for your garden. And then we start to see the society's energy spilling outdoors. Trees, shrubs, and plants arrived in May and were handed out to members. And by autumn, directors were touring the gardens around town, noting with satisfaction just how many fine gardens were flourishing. Within 2 years, they were mounting a proper flower show with sections for asters, dahlias, gladiolas, geraniums, pansies, hydrangeas, phlox, nasturtiums, stocks, balsams, poppies, fir beans, sweet peas, hollyhocks, roses, and tuberoses. And they even had a wildflower category for children. So this first flower show seems pretty ambitious, but sort of throughout the years, you can see this sort of narrowing down into more specific categories of flowers, as this was a very sort of daunting task, it seemed, for the flower show. So as they sort of started to get their footing, they had a little bit more of a refined flower show, you could say. By 1910, the Society was organizing discount seeds, plants, bulbs, fruits, ornamental trees, and shrubs for its members. And now, back in the day, at this time, around 1910, there wasn't anything like New North around, or any of the other garden centers that you can see at like hardware stores or grocery stores. So you might have probably definitely been able to find seeds at the general store, but the plants, bulbs, and other things like that, they would have had to probably be special ordered. And so you might have to first special order a catalog of the plants to get that in, to look at everything, and then go about ordering from there. And the society would actually order everything and place a big order for all the members. And with this, they were able to then offer the discounts. So that probably means that they were offering sort of maybe more so wholesale prices to their members rather than the retail prices. And we can see that still to this day. So instead of the Horticultural Society placing all the big orders for all the members, we see them now offering discounts to all the garden centers. Just because we have so many more garden centers just so readily available, it doesn't really make sense for them to place a big order altogether. And so they're still trying to make gardening affordable and accessible to their members. And so with all of that, the first wave of horticultural enthusiasm was underway. Now, leadership would rotate annually. We saw Judge Stone, E.P. Maloney, and others take their turn, but the goals held steady. Organize discounts for members, encourage Arbor Day tree planting, and work with schools to green their grounds. In this phase, the Society taught an enduring lesson. Civic beauty starts at the lot line, but the benefits spill into the street. In 1914, we see J.W. LeBreton Ross elected as president. And now let's take a look at him for a second, because he will become important again in a moment. J.W. LeBreton Ross served as the Sault Ste. Marie Canal's longest tenured superintendent, leading the site from 1907 to 1936. He and his family lived in the historic superintendent's residence, witnessing the canal's evolution into a major transportation route and overseeing its operations during a transformative period. And now I did mention Ross in an earlier podcast. I read an article about the superintendent's residence at the canal. So if you want to check that out, you can see sort of a bit of his legacy there, just on the historic superintendent's residence. And now Ross was now well known not just for his administrative leadership, but also for his deep passion for horticulture. He was also a founding member of the Sault Ste. Marie Historical Society, helping shape the region's cultural heritage. And here is another link that we have to the museum. So the museum is actually made up of the Sault Ste. Marie Historical Society and the 49th Regiment Historical Society. So those two societies merged and formed the Sault Ste. Marie Museum. So really, in essence, LeBreton Ross is also in part helped found the Sault Ste. Marie Museum. But now, getting back to our story, we were in 1914. All seemed to be going well. Then, the hard reality of wartime hit. By 1916, the pressures and privations of the First World War thinned both time and resources. They held a successful fall show in 1915, but then they faded away. And after a tentative attempt to regroup around 1920, the First Society went quiet. The idea, however, did not die. It simply overwintered. Now we move on into the second and current iteration of the Sault Ste. Marie Horticultural Society. Like any hardy perennial, the society returned stronger. On March 1st, 1926, organizers secured the required membership numbers of 101 out of the required 75. So they had a big demand, once again, for the Horticultural Society. On March 11th, 1926, they received the authority to organize and form an official horticultural society in the Sault. They held their organizing meeting on April 8th and elected the first set of officers. J.W. LeBreton Ross, who had helped spearhead the reorganization of the society, became president, and momentum built immediately. They incorporated talks and demonstrations into their meetings to further their education mission. The annual flower show resumed, and a youth focus was sowed from the start. And still to this day, the society keeps up with the lectures and demonstrations. And so at every monthly meeting, they hold lectures. And so that is why at the monthly meeting for March, I was able to give this presentation. So this is something that has endured from the start and has lasted through their 100-year history. Now, let's look at the 1920s. So if the 1908 group proved the concept, the 1926 cohort perfected the formula. Their lectures drew crowds. They even had speakers from out of town, like the president of the Toronto Horticultural Society. So they were drawing people in from out of town to do those talks, sometimes even as far away as Toronto. And I don't think the roads were as easy to drive on as they are today, but maybe he took the train. Who knows? The 1927 flower show drew over 1,000 attendees. They were also offering their memberships for $1, like the society before. Membership climbed past 100 and kept going. By 1927, the society was offering member discounts on seeds and bulbs in the winter, so gardeners were ready to plant come the thaw. In 1928, the society spoke to the city council about beautifying the city lot behind the courthouse. And now this is the courthouse that we have today. So if you can picture it, if you think of in the back, they have their big huge parking lot there. Well, originally it was more just a green space, and so the Horticultural Society wanted to sort of beautify that area, make it more inviting, so that it was more welcoming for visitors, tourists, and just citizens. And so they were suggesting placing the memorial for Colonel C.H.L. Jones, which he gifted to the city, and the society was suggesting that it be known as Memorial Park. Now, I'm not sure if this part did go through, but they definitely were helping to take care of that little lot in behind the courthouse, at least for a couple years. In 1929, J.P. Reed suggested that the schools have flower plots maintained by the students so they could learn to garden. That year, they also began offering juvenile memberships at 15 cents compared to the $1 memberships for adults. They also added 6 sections for children in their annual flower show, again to encourage the youth to garden. And so as I was doing the research, I would see that when they were talking about things to encourage the youth to garden, that they would also state one of the reasons being if the kids were gardening, they were actually keeping out of trouble and not causing as much nuisance around town. Now, let's look at the 1930s. And so as we move into the 1930s, we get into the Great Depression. But it also seemed that the 30s were some of their most active years. So in 1930, they increased their plans for city improvement. They added a spring or early summer flower show in June for the early blooms like peonies, irises, and later roses. And now the name, it sort of flips back and forth between either the spring or early summer flower show, and it would either be held at the end of June or beginning of July, again, sort of always depending on the growing season. In April 1930, the Sault Star published a piece called A Fact a Day about the Sault, where we learned more about the history of the society and its early iteration. It says J.W. LeBreton Ross was behind reorganizing the society, and he then served as president for 2 terms, followed by Frank Allen and then J.P. Reed. And now Reed would later serve as the head of the Juvenile Society, or junior portion of the Hort Society. In 1930, we see Mrs. Jean Smith elected the 2nd vice president. In this largely male-dominated society, she was the first woman elected to the executive board, not just as a director. So this was sort of big steps, and really nice to see that women were finally starting to take more of a leadership role. In 1931, Effie Crawford was elected president. Their plans for the year continued with their juvenile program, but they also acquired the plot near the fire hall on Wallace Terrace, so the West End Fire Hall, and they worked with the city to beautify the lot. The city added the fill, and the society added the plants and shrubs. And so once again, we start to see the society going out and trying to beautify city lots. So the city didn't really have the manpower to take care of all the lots, so some of them were sort of falling into disrepair, becoming a little bit of an eyesore to the city. So the Hort Society wanted to sort of take it upon themselves, try to help out, beautify it again for tourists, but also for everyday citizens. And they would continue to take care of this fire hall on Wallace Terrace for several years, and so it was just part of their annual program to take care of this West End Fire Hall lot. In 1932, they had a membership of 495 regular members and 260 junior members. And I think this was possibly one of their biggest years ever. In 1933, to promote the summer flower show in August, they made flower baskets and put them in stores across the city. And now, also for this flower show, they would kind of flip between the names. It was either called the Summer Flower Show, or more often we saw them just call it the Annual Flower Show. So this sort of seemed to be their main flower show. And it would typically be held at the end of August or sometimes the beginning of September, again, just depending on the growing season. By 1934, the Society began to focus more on vegetables, giving talks on how to grow them, adding sections for them in the flower shows, and this was in response to the Great Depression and the need that the community was having for growing their own food. So you can kind of almost compare it to today. Food prices are soaring and it's becoming very expensive to buy your own fruits and vegetables. So to kind of help out and step in, the society wanted to help out these citizens grow their own food so that they would be able to sort of get through these very troubling times. In 1935, we see Henry Davis elected president. That year, they also planned to beautify the street approach to the ferry dock. And now this is the lower half of Brock Street, now Russ Ramsey Way, where the Rotary Welcome Arch is, just in front of City Hall. So that actually was where the ferry dock was, or the main ferry dock was for visitors to come into the Sault. And so they wanted to give tourists, again, a very good first impression of the Sault. And they would also continue to take care of the lot on Wallace Terrace. In 1938, G.R. Williams was president. That year, they planned to plant trees along the highway to make a good impression, to make a good first impression for visitors coming into the city via the highway. They planted 2 rows of elm trees on trunk at the approach to the Sault. The following year, they asked the Minister of Highways if they could plant 1,000 trees along trunk at the entrance to the Sault. So the Ontario Highway Department provided 400 Norway maples, as well as some white spruce, Colorado spruce, and Scotch pine, as well as some assistant to plant these trees. And I kind of thinking and looking at Trunk Road right now, sort of at that approach, it's possible, unfortunately, that a lot of them have been cut down throughout the years. Sometimes maples don't last that long, so maybe the maples had to be cut down, but also I think just with the growth and development of the city, unfortunately, those trees had to be cut down. But moving on to the 1940s. So Fred Dwyer led through much of the decade as the society adapted to wartime realities. Vegetable instruction stepped to the front once again, and Victory Gardens became both patriotic and practical. In 1941, they set out to plant 500 maples on Highway 17 east of Echo Bay. They also canceled the annual spring flower show due to the war, but they still held the late summer flower show or annual flower show. In 1943, they distributed 3,225 seed packets to school children. So these would be for the children to use at home or in the schools. But yeah, you can see them once again really trying to get the kids into gardening and make it accessible for them. In 1944, with the ongoing war, they feared the Horticultural Society might end as it had during the First World War. Dwyer was once again elected president, and they continued to care for the ferry dock grounds and promote Victory Gardens due to the shortage of canned goods. So they were asking people to grow their own food, and if they had any leftovers, if they could donate them so that those could be canned and handed out to people in need around the city. In 1945, they planted 100 ornamental shrubs at the ferry dock. With the improvements made by the Horticultural Society to the ferry dock, tourists gave the society many compliments, and citizens were very thankful to the Horticultural Society. The society began discussions of adding a fish pond and seating area to the ferry dock grounds. I could just imagine it. That would have been very beautiful to see. In 1947, they began to care for the grounds in Bishop's Court, and they received permission from the City Council to take care of the grounds of the old Queen Street East Cemetery. And last year, if you took part in our ghost walk of the Queen Street East Cemetery, you heard me talk about the Horticultural Society taking care of the grounds. And so they were not only going there, cutting the grass and sort of maintaining the flowers and other gardens that they started planting there, but they would also help to take care of the headstones. So there were vandals, and just sort of the weathers of times. Sometimes the headstones would collapse, so they would help to clean that up and take care of them. They would also set up a more of a fence around, so that old wire fence that you see around the cemetery, that was actually added by the Sault Ste. Marie Horticultural Society. And if you are interested in the ghost walk, you missed it last year, or just want to go out again, we will be holding that once again in October, so keep your eyes peeled on our social medias for that to come in the fall. So also in 1947, they held their first annual Horticultural Society dinner and AGM. So this was sort of a big banquet they held every January in combination with their annual general meeting. And now moving on to the 1950s. So the post-war, the program broadened. The Spring Flower Show returned, and then from 1952 to 1954, Percy Davis was president. Then, in 1955, they elected George Lee, and he became I think one of the longest reigning presidents of the society. And so he served at least until 1976, when I stopped my research. So I'm not sure how long he continued to serve for, or if there were other presidents who served for longer terms than he did. But at least so far in our story, he is definitely the longest serving president of the Hort Society. 1956 was the first year that the annual district convention of the Ontario Horticultural Association was held in the Sault. So that was a very big deal for them, and just wonderful to see our Horticultural Society growing and thriving. And now here is our last part, looking at the 1960s all the way up into 1976. In 1960, a new tradition bloomed, the dedicated Rose Show. It replaced the Spring Show and focused solely on beautiful roses. There were various categories like the Peace Rose, the Single Rose, Floribunda, etc. It kind of changed year to year, but those three seem to be sort of the most consistent throughout. In 1966, the Society began to care for the Shingwalk Cemetery as part of the Centennial Project. And so they would care for this at least for a few years. They probably stopped the care in 1970 when the Shingwalk Residential School closed, and then Algoma University moved into the property in 1971. And we have sort of reports and the stories from the survivors who had their first survivor gathering in 1981. 300 survivors and their families came and gathered to have a reunion at the Shingwalk Residential School. And we'll probably talk more about this in a different episode, or I've sort of mentioned it in previous episodes. But anyway, at that reunion, the survivors went over to the cemetery, and they noted just how neglected it had become. So in those sort of 10 years that Algoma had been there, so at that time it was Algoma College, they hadn't really seemed to be caring for the cemetery. So that is probably meaning that the Society only was able to care for the cemetery for at least those few years while the Shingwalk Residential School was still in operation. In 1967, for the Canadian Centennial, they had a tree planting at the courthouse. So Sheriff George Lee presented the Centennial Flowering Crab, which was planted by Arthur A. Wishart. In 1968, this was sort of the last mention that we see of the Horticultural Society dinner. From then on, we only see talks of the AGM, but no dinner or banquet. And so it had a good long 20-year run, but it eventually did come to an end. In 1969, they reported that kids had destroyed the young maples planted by the Society. So here, this is just proof that kids were getting up to nuisance, so they wanted to keep the kids occupied with gardening so that things like this wouldn't happen. In 1968, the Horticultural Society had taken up care of the grounds at the Old Stone House. And then in 1971, they were sort of talking and looking at planting roses at the Old Stone House. And so there are some rose bushes still there. And I wonder, are those the same roses planted by the Horticultural Society around 1971? Perhaps. So in 1970, the first life membership was given to Mr. H. Beilhartz, and now did serve as president of the Sault Horticultural Society for a bit, but then he actually went on and became the District 13 Horticultural Society president. So he was sort of more of the president of the larger District Hort Society. In 1975, the Royal Canadian Legion was preparing for its upcoming 50th anniversary, which it would celebrate in 1976. The Netherlands were growing a golden tulip for their golden anniversary, and our local Legion branch offered the Horticultural Society the ability to buy the tulips through their office, as the Horticultural Society would also be celebrating their golden anniversary in 1976. In March 1975, the Society posted a notice in the Sault Star that said their objectives were to encourage citizens to create beauty by planting and caring for the area immediate to their homes. In addition, the Society maintained the Queen Street East Cemetery. And so here you can see the sort of the mission of the Horticultural Society in 1975. In 1975, the Horticultural Society had 400 members, the highest in 10 years. In 1976, during their 50th anniversary year, they once again held their annual rose show in July, and then the annual flower show in August, which was called the best show in years. Now, in closing, when you walk past an old elm or maple in a straight line along a road, when you walk past the old Queen Street Cemetery, or when you enter the canal grounds in the summer and feel that old English garden warmth, you are looking upon a century of volunteer work. The first iteration planted the idea. The second nurtured it for 100 years, and they continue to share and grow together. So there is the first 50 years of the Horticultural Society of Sault Ste. Marie. I will try and get the second part out. Not sure when. It is a lot of research, and in the later years there wasn't as much published about the Horticultural Society in the newspapers. Journalism didn't seem to be focusing on sort of the minute detail gossip like it had in the past. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. It was really fun to be able to give the talks to the Hort Society members and garden enthusiasts, so I hope you enjoy it just the same as them. And as always, thanks for listening. Bye.
Have you been to your local museum lately? Visit us at the Sault Ste. Marie Museum, located in downtown Sault Ste. Marie, the one with the big clock tower on the top. Our hours of operation are 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Tuesday to Saturday. We have 3 floors of exhibits that we constantly work on updating. The whole family is welcome, as we have activity sheets and scavenger hunts with prizes for every kiddo, a discovery gallery full of hands-on learning, and more interactive elements scattered throughout the museum. And don't forget to come say hi and let us know you're a listener of the podcast.